The idea behind the show is simply asking guests what they would tell a stranger on a plane if they were sitting next to them and the stranger asked them for advice.
The scenery is passing very fast, but the seer is constant. The one who's seeing is the same.
Let me appreciate you for asking a question that I haven't been asked after 2,500 or so interviews over the years.
Is you have to drop the ego, which is everyone's greatest obstacle.
In 2008, Grant and I had been married for 4 years. I was pregnant with my first child. The economy was collapsing, and we were on the verge of losing everything financially.
So it's so exciting with this new show to be here with Angel Arock Castillo. And, where I want to start, Arock, is I wanted to, on our other show that I have, we'll go into your backstory and stuff like that. With this show, we don't have that luxury as much. So let me ask you first and foremost, and this is probably a really big question, a deep question. You're probably maybe not used to getting hit with this deep of a question on the first question of an interview. But what are your thoughts around this idea of the word legacy? And so what I mean by that, just for some backstory, is I have some people that tell me they think legacy is what you create, meaning like you intentionally go, here's what I want, so this is what I have to do to have that be my legacy. Other people say somebody else will decide my legacy and it'll just happen on its own. So I guess my question is, what are your thoughts just around this idea of this word legacy?
Well, that's an actual good question, right? I think legacy is for me at least it's something that, like, what are you leaving behind for your family, for your kids and your generation, right? Generation wealth and all that. That's what comes to mind when I think of legacy. Like, what am I leaving behind? I was just talking to my wife about, like, my 4-year-old is into Ninja Turtles, and I was just thinking, like, imagine, like, the creator of these characters, like, look at how long they've been around for. It's just years after years, generations, and people are, my kids are now watching that, so it's creating something that's long lasting, that's forever, like timeless.
So I love that, and it makes me think of I heard this interview one time, and it was interesting. The person said, they asked the person what they thought legacy meant to them, and they said basically it's anything that I create that lives longer than my body. And I just thought that was such
Good point.
Such a good summary. I will say too, Arock, that I also, this is just my personal take, I also think our legacy is what people say behind our back when we're not around, because I think we think a legacy is always when we're gone, but I also think it's how does somebody talk about us when we're not around. And I say that, we all know the whole great quote of what other people think of me is none of my business. And I agree with that. But at the same time, it's still, I think it's still a factor of our legacy as to what people actually say when we're not around, because it's kind of, did we leave that person better than we found them and stuff like that? And if we did, people usually say good stuff about us when we're gone. So that's just a side note, is I don't think we have to be dead for our legacy to come to life.
100%. And I'm glad you point that out, because 2 weeks ago, I was with talking to a creative director. We were talking about creating content, and he tells me, he's like, do you got a second? Let me talk to a few people that know you. I want to get their perspective on what you do in the music space. And when I was hearing them talk about me being the third party, it was just game changer. Like, it opened up my, the way I think about things in just a whole nother way, because it made me realize, like, wow, like, I've done all this stuff, and this is what people really think about me and what I do in the space. And maybe, yeah, sometimes I kind of do know, but it's good to hear from another point of view, somebody else's perspective. It's crazy you mentioned that, because that just happened to me 2 weeks ago, hearing it from other people. And so you're right, you don't have to be, gone in order to, hear that.
I love it. I love that. And so let me ask you a follow-up, is this idea, this big word success that we all hear people talk about so freely all the time. One of the things I've discovered in interviews over the year is many people describe success differently, even the people where it might mean a similar thing to them, they still define it differently. So what does success mean to you?
it's hard for me to say that, right? Because I feel like I'm never satisfied. Like I feel like that's what got me to like how my partner says what brought us to the dance. But um I mean, maybe I'm the wrong person to get asked that, because for me, like I never have enough. I'm always looking for the next. And for some other people, they might feel like, hey, you know what? Like success, everybody has different goals. Everybody's happiness comes from a different place, So I just feel like, I'm always looking to, if I get to 100, how do I get to 200? How do I get to 300 and so forth? And that's always a bad thing. That's always a bad thing. But I feel like that's what's gotten me, where I'm at now. It's just, overachiever and just trying to continue playing the game.
Let me ask you this. You have been a DJ for a number of years. What drew you to that? Or do you even know what drew you to that? Like, I'm curious if there was a catalyst, or if there was something that was a driving force that put you into that world.
The first day I walked into my middle school dance, I realized that there was actually a DJ. I didn't know what a DJ was until I seen the guy playing the music and controlling the crowd. And I think the way that the music was controlling people's emotions, and just the way he was just moving the dance floor just by changing the songs and people's reactions, and the way that music connected with people's souls was just, for me, was what inspired me. And I said I want to be in the music space, because I feel like music is a big part of our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And so let me ask you as well, as far as with DJing, you've been able to build this amazing platform. So can you tell us a bit more about the platform? And again, maybe I'll ask, does this come back to your fondness for the DJing world and your desire to help other DJs?
Absolutely. It started because I worked at a radio station, my local radio station, biggest radio station in the city. And I felt like at that point, I felt like I made it at the time. And the way I was getting music, it felt very outdated. I was getting music, discovering new music via email. And I felt like I needed to enhance the way I discovered music for my own sake, for my own workload, right? And I decided to create a platform where DJs can discover new music and download music for their sets. And it started that way. And it also started because I wanted to, for once, just take that priority of making myself the star of the show and just really helping others become the stars. And I feel like that paid off much better.
And so, I mean, as far as the platform itself, how, just more curiosity as somebody, naive to it and coming in from the outside looking in, how does it serve people? Like, what does it look like to somebody that, if you were telling people this is what it's all about, how would you describe it?
The number one question is that people never ask themselves is, how do DJs get music? Most people think that DJs get music from Spotify or Apple Music, but that's not the case. DJs get music from companies like ours. They subscribe to a service like BPM. They go in and they get all the latest releases from Drake, Rihanna, Taylor Swift, DJ Khaled, you name it, the list goes on. And they come in, they check out what's hot, they check out what's trending. They depend on us to curate a lot of the stuff that's coming out and telling them what's hot and what edits they should be playing, and then download the music and then go on and perform live on stage.
Amazing. And so I guess then, if we kind of move further along down sort of this path, I'm going to ask you, before I jump into my main question I want to ask you, excuse me, I'm going to ask you a question that I've asked literally thousands of times, somewhat similar to my main question I want to ask you, Arock, but this is a question I call the time machine question. And, maybe it even explains itself when I call it that, but basically it's a question of, if you could jump into a time machine and go back and talk to a younger Arock, give him one piece of life advice based on what you've learned in the years since, what do you think you might tell younger Arock?
Get started young. Get started young, because I feel like if you get started at a young age and you put away the partying, you put away, the distraction that most people oftentimes get, like in their teens or when they turn 21. If you kind of put that aside, it's all going to pay itself off. If you get started early, you get a head start and focus on creating something that's gonna, talk about legacy, something that's gonna generate you income for the next 10, 15, 20 years, right?
Love that.
So
No, I love that. That's I think that's great advice. And so my follow-up question is the big question I want to ask, which is this question of if you could jump on, if you were, I shouldn't say could jump on, if you were sitting on a plane, sitting next to a passenger, they leaned over and said, hey, however they figure that out, like, I recognize you, or I think you've been successful, or have you been successful? If so, what would you tell me? What I'm curious about is if a person was sitting next to you and they were looking for some life advice, what do you think you might tell them? Now, recognizing that you've already said what you would tell your younger self, but obviously this is somebody different that you don't know. So it may be the same advice, but I'm thinking also it may be different because this is a stranger saying, hey, what have you learned in the years since that you might tell me? What would you say to that person, do you think?
the biggest advice I would say is what I would tell someone like that. It would be getting started young is one point, but then never giving up, because most people think that success or what they're trying to achieve will come overnight. And for some people, it may be so, but most of the time, you just never know when it's going to happen. And it can either be 2 years or 10 years, and you just never know what's on the other side of that wall, right? I always like that meme on social media where the guy's like digging and he gives up, and the gold is literally like not even a foot away. And that's really how it is in real life. You just never know when it's going to come, and once you get there, it's the best thing, you know what I mean? It's satisfying for you, for your family, for your kids, everybody, you know.
So I love that meme. And let me ask you this. I was going to ask you, just before I ask you the most important question of how people can connect with you and learn more, I was going to ask you what your favorite book is, if you are a reader and all that kind of stuff, or whether you listen to audiobooks, all that jazz. I was going to go down that path. But what's interesting about that meme, I don't know if you are familiar with the story 3 Feet from Gold. Are you familiar with that story?
No, I'm
So you
not.
should check out the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. There's, I think
Okay.
it's almost a full chapter dedicated to the story called 3 Feet from Gold, about this guy who was told that he had gold in his land, and he dug and spent all this money and everything, and then finally said, there's no gold here. And then he sold the land and moved on. And the next person that bought it knew a bit about digging and all that, and said, well, they've already done all this work, I might as well just continue. And if gold was only 3 feet lower than where the guy stopped after, for years, planning to do this, spending all the money and, spending all the money in this equipment and not finding one drop of gold. And then the next guy is super wealthy because he only had to dig 3 feet. And I believe that's probably where that meme came from. The idea of 3
Yeah.
feet from gold. And there's actually a book called 3 Feet from Gold as well that was written and
Okay.
by Napoleon Hill's book. So I just wanted to put that out there because it's a good segue for me to ask that final question of, are you a book reader? And if so, is there a book that changed your life that you'd love to share or like to share with us?
I like the Nike story, the Nike book. I don't really read much. I consume most of my content via video or some of the audiobooks or podcasts, but not too much on the reading side.
So I mentioned that I want to ask you, and I think it's really important in terms of where people can connect with you. They can learn more. If people are saying, I want to learn more about this. Maybe they're a DJ and they want to learn more about that side. Maybe they just want to learn more about how they could work with you, hire you. Maybe they want to learn more about your service, BPM. Where would you send them? Like, is there a hub or is there a place you normally send people?
Yeah, so our website is bpmsupreme.com, B as in boy, P as in Peter, M as in Mary, supreme.com. My personal website is Arock's World, AROCKS world.com. And then my social media is just, my Instagram is just AROCK, it's just Arock. So you can find me there, and I'm pretty active on social media, so you guys can find a lot of content there.
Amazing. Well, Arock, I'm going to wave the flag for all the great stuff you're doing. We're going to recommend, obviously, people go check out your website, check out your work, check out BPM, all that kind of good stuff. So I just want to thank you so much. Salute you. Thank you for being here with us today, helping us to make some magic happen.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Corey.